Few years ago, I moved into an older apartment. It was pretty cheap, and the building only had 8 units in it. There were 4 on the ground floor and 4 up above it, all of them opening up to the outside. It was really all that I could afford, or else there was no way that I would have moved in there. The rent was like $400 a month, and in that location was really cheap. The apartment that I had was on the ground level and at the far end. It had 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room, and a kitchen. After moving in, I didn't have a problem with filling up the space with the furniture that I had, and I didn't even have that much stuff. For the first 2 or 3 days, things went fine. I was gone for most of the day at work and back by nighttime. One night I went to bed at about 10 o'clock only to be woken up in the middle of the night. Somebody was knocking on my front door. I looked at the clock and it was midnight. I sat up and turned on the light for my bedroom. Why would anybody be knocking on my door at midnight? I got up out of bed and then walked out into the living room and turned the light on. I could sort of see that there was somebody at the door, but just saw their silhouette. When the light turned on, though, they turned and walked away. I didn't get a good look at them at all. I went over to the door and looked out of it, but by now they were gone and I didn't see anything. It was kind of weird, but I decided just to go back to bed. I was able to get back to sleep, and I'm not aware of the person coming back that night. I didn't wake up for the rest of the night. The next day was normal. I got up, went to work, and then came back home. That night, I fell asleep at the usual time of around 10 p.m., but once more, for the second night in a row, I was woken up in the night. This time, though, I wasn't sure what woke me. I didn't hear anybody knocking on the front door or anything. I turned over to go back to sleep, but I really wasn't that tired. I was wide awake, and I had a bad feeling for some reason. I sat up and turned on my bedroom light. Everything seemed fine to me. I decided to get up and go to the bathroom, and then try to fall back asleep. So I got up from my bed and walked over to my bedroom door. The door was closed, and I opened it to my living room and kitchen area. The living room was closest to me, and the kitchen was at the other end. The only light was coming from my bedroom, so it was kind of hard to see anything, but everything appeared to be normal. When I stepped out, though, I heard a noise. It was coming from my kitchen and behind the counter in an area that was not visible to me. I stopped where I was and looked over to the counter. Now my heart started beating really fast. I had no idea what that could have been. I said, "Is anybody there?" It was dead silent. I didn't hear any noise at all. I had no idea what to do in this situation. It sure seemed like somebody was in there, but I still was not 100% convinced. My eyes were just locked on the counter area where I had heard the noise. Then a few seconds later, suddenly somebody appeared. They stood out from behind the counter and immediately started running towards my front door. It was probably like 15 feet away from them. It was still very dark, and I couldn't see them very well, but I was sure that it was my landlord. He made it to the door, opened it up, and then ran out of my apartment. I really couldn't believe it. I ran over to the door and then locked it, then went into my bedroom and called the police. I told them that my landlord was in my apartment in the middle of the night without permission. They came out and talked to me and said that they were going to talk to the landlord next. I went back to bed and the next day got more information. The landlord admitted to being in my apartment. He also apparently was involved in other illegal activity. As a result, all of us tenants of his building had to move out, and the building went to new ownership. I'm not sure of all the details. All I know is that I had to scramble to find a new place. This happened 2 years ago. I bought a new house, and I had a couple friends over to help me unload the truck full of boxes, and I paid them with food since they wouldn't accept money. They hung around for a few hours after just to hang out. When my friend Dale went to the bathroom, he came back and said he heard some noises from inside the walls, and that it sounded like there were some pipe issues. I took note of it, and the two of them left a little later. Since it was a Saturday, I stayed up pretty late on my laptop watching Netflix. However, I was hearing some light thumping sounds from above me, which was odd because my bedroom is upstairs. The only thing that could be above me would be the attic. Then I remembered Dale's comments about the noises from inside the walls. I went to the attic door and pulled it down, and I actually had to take a deep breath because I was a bit nervous. I climbed the stairs into the attic and pulled the light switch down. One very dim yellow light buzzed on, just barely lighting up the attic. The noises in the walls stopped, though. Either that or the noises just weren't coming from the attic I imagined, with no boxes up there yet. It was just basically a big empty space, and I could clearly see no one was up there. The only things in the entire attic were a couple giant framed paintings leaning on one of the walls. I went back down to my room and tried to get some sleep, but I heard the noises again. Now I started to fear there was a small animal on the walls, like a raccoon. The sound still seemed to be coming from directly above my room. It had to be in the attic. So once more I went up into the attic and looked to where I thought would be directly above my bedroom. The thing is, the attic didn't seem to extend the entire length of the house, so there's a wall covering where the section above my room should be. I walked over to the wall just to listen for potential noises, and I did hear noises from the other side of this wall. Then I looked at the two paintings leaning on the wall, how they were slightly angled. My heart started to race. I walked to the paintings and slightly angled one upwards off the wall, revealing a big hole in the wall. It took a few seconds for the reality to sink in. As I held the painting at an upright position, the painting was suddenly pushed out of my grip to fall flat on the floor. I nearly had a heart attack. Out from the hole came this sickly-looking girl. She seemed to be high on something. She was shaking, making weird noises, and she would start this creepy laughing. She grabbed onto me and dug her nails into my shoulders so hard I screamed, and I pushed her as hard as I could off of me. She fell backwards into the secret room, and I ran to the exit and shut the attic door behind me. I locked myself in my room as I called the police and reported that a crazy, dangerous person was in my attic. Cops arrived within 5 minutes. 3 cop cars ended up pulling up, and there were a total of 5 police officers in my house. 4 of them went into the attic, and I heard the struggle. The girl screamed like a creature, and it sounded like she was trying to attack the officers, which led to her getting tased. They finally managed to get her in cuffs and carry her out of the attic and outside to one of the cars. The girl had to be like anywhere from 25 to 35 years old, but like I said, she looked sickly. While the officers were still in the house, I went into the attic to examine the secret room. Inside was a pile of blankets, a dirty pillow, a lot of food wrappers, and human waste in one corner. It seemed as though this girl had been up there for a long time. It was truly a nightmare to discover this on my first night in my new house. This happened about a year ago, back when I had graduated from college. I had just gotten a paid internship for my field of study as a computer technician. My duties were to basically assist companies with basic computer errors they may face. It was an easy and well-rewarding job for me, as I loved computers ever since I was a kid. At the time, inflation was through the roof, so I was extremely grateful for this job. The only part I didn't like about it were the hours. I had to get up at around 11 p.m. and work well into the night till around 3 a.m. So whenever I got home, I would always be tired. During this internship, I've been renting out this small one-bedroom home as a place to stay. I earned enough to pay for it, but my parents were proud of me for getting this job, which made them pay for half. One night, I had been at work during the middle of my shift when I get a call from my boss. He had told me that he was suspending operations until the next day due to a possible storm emergency. This resulted in me having to clock out and go home for the night. As you could imagine, I was drained from working and instantly fell asleep listening to the falling rain. I'd say I slept for a good 3 hours or so when I awoke to a knocking sound, but much more sudden and fast. I glance over at the clock. It was 4 a.m. and was still pouring outside. Figuring it was likely hail hitting the roof, I disregarded it and tried my best to go back to sleep. However, not even a minute later, I hear the same noise again, this time much louder. I felt my blood run cold as I heard this, and realized it was coming from my wall. I was almost certain there was an animal living in my walls, as I don't live too far from a wooded area. I slowly get up from my bed and put my sliders on and put my ear up against the wall. It was quiet for a good minute before the unexpected happened. A knock louder than ever hit the wall, where I stumbled back where I just so happened to look up at the air vent. A quick flash of lightning illuminated what appeared to be someone's eyes looking at me through the vent. What disturbed me the most was their face. It was pale, and this person didn't appear to have any eyebrows. That was the best description I could give as they then ducked back down inside of the wall. I locked eye contact with this person for a good second before running out of the house to call the police. Thankfully, the cops in my city are the type that takes their job seriously, so they were able to get here quickly. One officer stayed with me while the other one inspected the wall and claimed that it was too narrow for anyone to fit through. After hearing this, I checked the wall myself and even went as far as to take it apart to realize that he was right. Needless to say, both officers went out of their way to shine their lights and actually look inside. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary or misplaced, so I thanked them for their time and they left. It was then where I called my parents, wanting to tell them about what I had seen. However, I must have caught them at a bad time, as they didn't want to hear it and claimed it was just night terrors. Now, I did have night terrors from my childhood that made its way into my adult years, but it was rare for me to have one. The next day, I went out to get drywall to replace the piece of wall I had taken out. I have never believed in the paranormal, but I have no other explanation for what I saw. Nothing has happened since, and I intend for it to remain that way. When I was 18, me and two of my friends moved in together into an apartment. We all worked regular jobs while doing online school, and with the three of us combined, the rent was easily affordable. Over the following year, though, one of them moved out, leaving just the two of us to pay the bill. It was still affordable, but much less than it used to be, and even had me stressing out a couple times. And after a few months, my other friend moved out as well. It wasn't their fault having to leave, but it still really sucked, and I was forced to find somewhere else to live on just my small paychecks. There weren't a lot of options within my budget, but I was willing to take anything as long as it was a roof over my head. Eventually, I found a listing for an apartment on the other side of town. From the pictures, it looked like a small building, only having 8 rooms, and it definitely was not very nice on the inside. Still, the price was okay with me, so I sent in a request to tour and went there later that night. I met the owner, Tom, and he walked me through the room. It was really small and really not that great, but again, there wasn't much I could do about it. The following week, I moved in. Once I got used to it, the place wasn't actually too bad. Sure, it wasn't very clean and looked really old, but it had all the basic things. The only thing that felt weird was this one door in the hallway. It was right across from my room, almost looking like it would be just another bedroom. But during the tour, Tom said my place was actually connected to the neighbors, so we shared that door. He explained that it always stayed locked from both sides and that I could just ignore it, assuming it was just like a wall. But sometimes I felt like it was a little weird if they could hear everything going on in my apartment. And on the flip side, I always felt like I had to be extra quiet so as to not disturb them. The door was clearly thin, so sound had to be going through easily. However, for the first week or so, I never heard anything from the other side. Like not even a little bit of noise or anything. It wasn't until one night after working late, I was sitting on the couch watching TV, when I heard a really loud thud come from the hallway. I walked over thinking something might have fallen over in my room, but then I noticed a bit of light moving around under the door to the other apartment. It looked like maybe a phone flashlight or something. I listened for a little bit, not trying to be too creepy, but just wanting to know what was going on. After all, that was the first time I'd ever heard anything from their apartment. But after only a minute, the light turned off and no more sounds came from behind the door. I went back to the couch and stayed up for another hour before going to bed. Throughout the night, I occasionally woke up hearing thuds or soft footsteps coming from that door in the hallway. I never got up to check on it because I knew there was nothing to really check on, but it gave me an eerie feeling for some reason, knowing they were up the entire night, doing something in the dark of their room. This went on for a few days, only hearing noises late at night, when most people would be sleeping. I never heard anyone talking, though, or really anything other than thuds and footsteps. But then one night, something was different. I woke up to a thud far louder than any of the others I'd heard. Immediately sat up in my bed with wide open eyes, staring at my door across the room. Something about that sound sent chills through me, making me feel like this was something I needed to check on. I slowly and quietly got out of my bed and walked over to my door, leaning against it and listening into the hallway. Nothing. It was completely silent now. I carefully opened the door, looking across the hall, and felt my body go numb. The other door was open. I hesitated, unsure what to do. But then I crept into the hallway and looked behind the partially open doorway. I almost didn't believe what I saw. It was a bedroom slightly smaller than mine, but it was empty aside from a mattress on the ground. There were no doorways leading to anywhere else. It was just a single room with no way in or out except for the door in my apartment. I ran and got my phone dialing 911 as I looked all around my apartment to make sure nobody was there. Luckily, whoever was in there had left. Police came and did their investigation, but strangely, Tom never picked up his phone. And soon we found out that Tom probably wasn't who he said he was. We never heard or saw from him again.